We already divided everything, my Aunt Vivica announced, blocking the doorway with a grease-stained paper plate of fried chicken. You were not invited for a reason, so you can take your cheap suitcase and turn right back around. The room behind her fell deadly silent as the family lawyer, Mr. Henderson, stepped out from the shadows, his deep voice cutting through the humid Atlanta air like a gavel striking a block. I am afraid that is impossible. Vivica, he said, adjusting his glasses, because her name is the only one in the will. The plate crashed to the floor, shattering into a dozen pieces just like her confidence. My name is Nia, and at 32 years old I am a forensic accountant in Chicago, accustomed to hunting down hidden assets and exposing corporate fraud. I thought I had escaped this toxic family 14 years ago, when they threw me out with nothing but the clothes on my back. But standing on that porch, I realized the hardest case of my life was just beginning. Before I tell you how I took down my entire family with a single laptop and a stack of bank statements, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit that like and subscribe button if you have ever had to fight for what was rightfully yours against the people who were supposed to protect you. The heavy scent of fried chicken vinegar, soaked collard greens, and old perfume hit me the moment I stepped through the double oak doors of Big Mama's historic mansion on Martin Luther King Drive. This was the repast, the traditional gathering after the funeral that was supposed to be about comfort. But in my family, it was always about the food and the gossip. I tightened my grip on the handle of my vintage Louis Vuitton carry-on, my knuckles turning white. The house was packed with people, mostly church members in their Sunday best and distant cousins I had not seen since I was a teenager. The air conditioning was struggling against the Georgia heat and the body heat of 100 people eating, drinking, and laughing, as if my grandmother had not just been put in the ground 2 hours ago. I walked into the foyer and the noise died down instantly. It started from the front door and rippled through the living room like a wave, until the only sound was the clinking of silverware on china and the hum of the refrigerator. Aunt Vivica appeared from the kitchen, blocking the hallway to the dining room like a linebacker in a floral dress. She was wearing a black hat so wide it threatened to take out the hallway sconces, and her eyes narrowed into slits the moment they landed on me. She looked me up and down, her gaze lingering on my tailored suit and designer bag with a mixture of greed and disdain. Who invited you? She demanded, her voice loud enough for the neighbors down the street to hear. We did not save a plate for you, Nia. This food is for family and the faithful who actually cared about Mama Rose, not for the thief who ran away to Chicago and never looked back. I stood my ground, feeling the eyes of the entire congregation burning into my back. I did not come for your dry macaroni and cheese, Auntie, I said, keeping my voice calm and cold, despite the rage simmering in my gut. I came because Mr. Henderson called me. And by the way, that dress you are wearing, I am pretty sure Big Mama bought that with the money she saved for my college tuition the year you claimed you needed surgery. Vivica gasped, clutching her pearls in a performance worthy of a soap opera. The audacity! She shrieked, looking around for support from the church mothers nodding in the corner. You come into this house of mourning and insult me. I was the one who changed her sheets. I was the one who fed her when she could not feed herself. Where were you, Nia? You were gone, living your high and mighty life in the city, too good for us. My cousin Keisha stepped up beside her mother, holding a glass of sweet tea, looking me up and down with a sneer. She was 28, but still acted like the spoiled brat who used to break my toys. Leave her alone, Mama Keisha said loud enough for everyone to hear. She just came back to see if there is any jewelry left to steal, just like that diamond ring she took when she was 18. The room erupted in whispers, and I knew exactly what story they were telling. But I just smiled, a cold, sharp smile, because they had no idea I was already recording everything. I stepped around Vivica, ignoring her sputtered indignation, and walked into the main living room. The air was thick with body heat and judgment. I saw the faces of the church mothers, women who had known me since I was in diapers, now looking at me with undisguised disdain. They huddled together on the velvet sofas, whispering behind their funeral fans. Their eyes darting from me to Vivica and back again. I knew exactly what they were saying. They were retelling the story of the diamond ring, the story Vivica had fed them for over a decade. "That is her," I heard Mrs. Gable whisper, not even trying to be discreet. "The one who stole Sister Rose's engagement ring. Can you believe she showed her face? If I were Vivica, I would call the police right now." "Some people have no shame," another woman replied, shaking her head so hard her wig shifted. "Vivica is a saint for not throwing her out bodily. After all she sacrificed to care for Rose." I stopped in the center of the room near the fireplace where Big Mama's portrait hung. She looked down at the chaos with that serene, knowing smile she always wore. I felt a sharp pang of grief tight and hot in my chest, but I shoved it down into the cold, analytical part of my brain. Grief was a luxury I could not afford yet, not when I was surrounded by predators. My cousin Keisha was lounging on the arm of a sofa picking at a plate of macaroni. She looked me up and down with a sneer that mirrored her mother's. "Nice bag, Nia," she drawled. "Is it real? Or did you steal that too?" "It is real, Keisha," I replied, not looking at her, my eyes scanning the room. "Just like the job I have." "You should try getting one sometime. It is liberating," Keisha sucked her teeth and rolled her eyes, but she did not have a comeback. I turned back to Vivica, who had followed me into the room, still clutching her platter of eggs like a shield. She was waving her left hand around as she gestured to the crowd playing the victim, and there it was, caught in a beam of sunlight filtering through the heavy drapes. On Vivica, ring finger, a diamond sparkled. It was a vintage European cut set in platinum with tiny sapphires on the side. It was unmistakable. It was Big Mama's ring, the same ring I had been accused of stealing when I was 18. The ring that had been the proof of my delinquency, the reason I was thrown out onto the street with nothing but a backpack. I pulled out my phone, pretending to check a message. In one fluid motion, I opened the camera, zoomed in, and snapped 3 high-resolution photos of Vivica's hand. The shutter sound was silent, but the evidence was screaming. "You know, Auntie?" I said, my voice carrying over the low murmur of the room. "It is a miracle. I heard that ring was lost forever, stolen by a wicked grandchild. And yet there it is, resurrected on your finger on the day of the funeral. Praise the Lord." Vivica froze. She looked down at her hand, then quickly covered it with her other hand, hiding the ring. Her eyes darted around the room, realizing her mistake. This is a different ring," she stammered, her voice rising in panic. "It is a gift. From Chad, is it?" I smiled, a cold, sharp expression that did not reach my eyes. "We will see about that, because unlike you, Auntie, I have the appraisal documents. Big Mama filed in 1998, and that setting is one of a kind." Before Vivica could dig herself deeper into her lie regarding the diamond ring, the back door swung open and Chad walked in, bringing with him a gust of hot, humid air and the faint smell of stale cigarette smoke. He was a tall, white man with the kind of faded handsomeness that comes from peaking in high school and spending the next 15 years chasing bad investments he wore, a suit that was too shiny and a smile that was too wide. He did not look like a man mourning his wife. Grandmother, he looked like a man who had just closed a deal. "What is all the tension for, ladies?" Chad boomed, clapping his hands together. He walked over to Keisha and kissed her on the cheek, then turned his attention to me. His eyes raked over my suit, assessing the cost, calculating the value. "You must be Nia. I am Chad, Keisha husband. I have heard a lot about you. Mostly that you are difficult, and I have heard nothing about you." I lied smoothly, which usually means you are irrelevant. Chad, smile faltered, then hardened. He stepped closer, invading my personal space, using his height to try and intimidate me. It was a tactic that might have worked on the old Nia. The current Nia dealt with federal prosecutors and cartel money launderers before breakfast. Chad was a guppy, Listen, sweetheart, he said, dropping the jovial act. I know you are here for a payout. Everyone wants a piece of the pie when the matriarch dies. But you need to understand something. This property, it is already spoken for. I have got developers lined up, the Apex Group. We are talking mixed-use, luxury condos, retail space on the ground floor. This whole neighborhood is gentrifying, and we are sitting on a lottery ticket. Apex Group, I repeated, keeping my face neutral. You mean the shell company that was indicted for Ponzi schemes in Florida last year? That is your partner. Chad blinked, a flicker of genuine alarm crossing his face. I do not know what you are talking about. Apex is legit. I have taken their deposits. The paperwork is in motion. We are going to bulldoze this drafty old money pit and turn it into cash, real cash. Vivica and Keisha are on board. So whatever sentimental game you are playing, drop it. I can cut you a check for $5,000 right now. Consider it a finder fee for showing up. $5,000, I said, laughing softly. You think Big Mama Legacy is worth $5,000? You think I can be bought for the price of a used Honda? It is more than you deserve, Chad sneered, his face reddening. You are not on the deed, Nia. You are not in the will, I made sure of that. I have been handling the estate planning for the last 2 years. You are a ghost. And ghosts do not get equity. He leaned in, his voice dropping to a whisper. Meant only for me. Take the money and run, Nia. Because I have debts, and people with debts do desperate things. You do not want to be in the way when the bulldozer comes. I looked at him, really looked at him. I saw the sweat beading on his upper lip, the slight tremor in his hands. This was not arrogance, it was terror, masquerading as power. He was not just greedy, he was cornered. Chad, I said, leaning in so only he could hear. I am a forensic accountant. I hunt down hidden assets for a living, and I can smell the desperation on you, like cheap cologne. You spent the deposit money already, did you not? Chad recoiled as if I had slapped him. Vivica, sensing that her son-in-law was losing control of the situation, decided to drop the bomb. She marched over to the sideboard and snatched up a leather portfolio. Enough of this talking, she screeched. You want to talk business? Let us talk business. Show her the papers. Keisha. Keisha grabbed the portfolio from her mother and pulled out a thick document. She thrust it toward me with a triumphant smirk. Read it and weep. Cousin, it is a quitclaim deed. Big Mama signed it 3 days before she died. She transferred the house, the land, everything to Mama and me. We are the owners, not you, not the estate, us. I took the document. The paper felt heavy. Official. It was a standard Georgia real estate transfer form. At the bottom, on the signature line for Rose Jenkins, was a shaky blue ink scrawl. It barely looked like letters, more like the tremors of a seismograph during an earthquake. She signed this, I asked, looking up at Vivica. On October 15th. That is right, Vivica said, crossing her arms over her chest. She had a moment of clarity. She called us to her bedside. She said, Vivica, take this house. Do what you have to do to save the family. She knew we needed the money. She wanted us to have it. Interesting, I murmured, my eyes scanning the notary stamp. It was stamped by a notary I did not recognize. Someone named Clyde Barnes. Probably one of Chad, drinking buddies. I held the paper up to the light. You know, in my line of work, I analyze a lot of documents. And there are 2 things wrong with this picture immediately. First, the ink density suggests the pen was pressed into the paper by a second hand, guiding the first. See the drag marks here. That is resistance. That is someone not wanting to sign. You are lying, Keisha shouted. She wanted to sign it. And second, I continued, my voice turning icy, and this is the part that is going to send you to prison. Auntie, I have Big Mama medical records on my phone right now, sent to me by the hospital administrator, who happens to be an old friend of mine. On October 15th, Big Mama was in a medically induced coma, following her second stroke. She was intubated. She could not lift a finger, let alone sign a legal document. The room went deadly silent. The church mothers stopped fanning themselves. The chewing stopped. Even the air seemed to still. You forged a comatose woman's signature to steal her house, I said, lowering the paper, but holding on to it tight. This is not a deed, Vivica. This is a felony. It is elder abuse and it is fraud. Vivica's face drained of all color. She looked at the paper in my hand, then at Chad, then at Keisha. Her mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. The righteous anger was gone, replaced by the raw, naked fear of a criminal who realizes they left the gun at the scene of the crime. Give that back! Chad lunged forward, panic overriding his senses. That is my property! Chad. Hand clawed at the document, his fingernails grazing my wrist. But I was faster. I sidestepped, pivoting on my heel, and let his momentum carry him past me. He stumbled, crashing hip first into the antique sideboard of vase. One Big Mama had cherished for 40 years wobbled and smashed onto the floor, sending porcelain shards skittering across the hardwood. You thief! Keisha screamed, abandoning all pretense of civilization. She launched herself at me, hands reaching for my hair. Give us the deed! It is ours! The room erupted into chaos. The church mothers shrieked, clutching their Bibles and scattering like pigeons. Several cousins stood up, unsure whether to intervene or film it for WorldStar. I did not have time to think. I reacted based on muscle memory from self-defense classes. I took in Chicago. I dropped my suitcase and raised my arm to block Keisha. Strike, shoving her back. Hard. She fell onto the sofa, knocking over a tray of sweet tea that soaked into the upholstery, staining the velvet, a dark, ruinous brown. Stop it! Vivica yelled, grabbing a heavy brass candlestick from the mantel. Get out of my house, you demon! I will not let you ruin us! She raised the candlestick, her eyes wild with desperation. She was going to hit me. She was actually going to hit me. I braced myself, calculating the distance, ready to fight my own family in the house, where I learned to walk. Boom, boom, boom! 3 thunderous knocks on the front door shook the frames of the pictures on the walls. The sound was so loud, so authoritative, that it froze everyone in place. Vivica's arm halted in midair. Chad stopped trying to scramble up from the floor amidst the broken pottery. The front door swung open, crashing against the wall. Stopper, framed in the doorway backlit by the afternoon sun, stood Mr. Henderson. He was wearing a charcoal 3-piece suit that cost more than Chad Carr. He leaned on a silver-tipped cane, not because he needed it, but because it made him look like a judge passing a sentence. Behind him stood 2 massive men in dark suits, their arms crossed, their eyes hidden behind sunglasses. Private security. Mr. Henderson stepped into the foyer. He did not look at the broken vase. He did not look at the spilled tea. He looked straight at Vivica holding the candlestick. Vivica? Jenkins. His voice was a deep baritone that demanded absolute silence. I suggest you put that weapon down before my associates here detain you for assault. Vivica lowered her arms slowly, her hands trembling, the candlestick clattering onto the table. Mr. Henderson, she whimpered. She stole our papers. She is attacking us. Mr. Henderson walked into the room, the crowd parting for him like the Red Sea. He stopped in front of me, looked me up and down to ensure I was unharmed, and then turned his gaze to Chad, who was wiping blood from a small cut on his lip. No one is stealing anything, Mr. Henderson said, adjusting his silk tie, because you cannot steal what does not belong to you. And I am here to inform you that the piece of paper you are fighting over is worthless trash. He held up a thick wax-sealed envelope. I have the last will and testament of Rose Jenkins right here, and unlike your little art project, this was notarized, videotaped, and filed with the state court 3 years ago. He paused, letting the weight of the moment crush the air out of the room. Now everyone sit down and shut up. Court is in session. Mr. Henderson did not sit down. He stood in the center of the living room, like a monolith, his charcoal suit absorbing the afternoon light, making him look even larger than he was. He leaned both hands on the silver head of his cane and surveyed the room with a look of profound disappointment. Vivica smoothed her dress, trying to compose herself after her violent outburst. She forced a smile that looked like a grimace plastered onto a skull. "Mr. Henderson," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "You are just in time. We were just explaining to Nia here that Mama Rose made her wishes clear before she passed. You are here to witness the transfer of the deed. Are you not? You know how much Mama trusted you." Mr. Henderson did not return the smile. He looked at Vivica, then at the crumpled document in her hand, then back at her face. "I am not here to witness anything. Not here to—" "Vivica," he said, his voice rumbling through the floorboards, "I am here to stop a crime in progress." He gestured to one of the security guards, who stepped forward and handed him a manila folder. Mr. Henderson opened it slowly, the sound of the paper sliding against cardboard, echoing in the silent room. "You claim your mother signed that quitclaim deed on October 15th, he stated. "It was not a question. It was a trap." Vivica nodded vigorously. "Yes, sir, October 15th. She was having a good day. She called us in and said she wanted to settle her affairs. She signed it right on the tray table." Mr. Henderson pulled a document from his folder and held it up. It was a hospital log stamped with the official seal of Emory University Hospital. "Let me tell you about October 15th. Vivica, on October 15th at 800 hours, your mother suffered a massive cerebral hemorrhage. By 9:30, she was intubated and placed on a ventilator. Her Glasgow coma scale was a 3. That is the lowest score possible. It means deep coma, no response to pain, no response to sound, no voluntary movement whatsoever." The color drained from Vivica's face so fast, she looked like she had seen a ghost. Mr. Henderson took a step closer, his voice dropping to a dangerous growl. "So unless Rose Jenkins learned how to sign legal documents while being brain-dead and hooked up to life support, that piece of paper in your hand is a forgery, and not just a forgery, it is a clumsy, insulting attempt to defraud this estate." Chad tried to interject, his voice cracking. "Look, maybe we got the date wrong. It was a stressful time Mr. Henderson cut him off with a sharp wave of his hand. "Do not insult my intelligence, son. I have the nurse logs right here." Vivica visited for 15 minutes on the 14th to ask about the life insurance policy. She did not visit on the 15th. She was at the casino. The security footage from the Harrah's parking lot confirms it. A gasp went through the room. The church mothers looked at Vivica with horror. Nia watched with a cold satisfaction as her aunt shrank under the weight of the truth. Mr. Henderson pointed a long finger at the deed. "That document is void. It is worthless. It is evidence of a second-degree felony in the state of Georgia, forgery in the first degree, elder exploitation. If you do not hand it over to me right now, I will have the police adding it to the report. They are already filing for the assault on my client." Vivica's hand shook violently. The papers slipped from her fingers and fluttered to the floor, landing at Mr. Henderson. Polished wingtip shoes. He placed the tip of his cane on it, pinning it to the ground like a dead insect. "Now that we have cleared the air regarding that piece of trash," he said, his eyes hard, "let us move on to the real reason I am here, the reading of the actual will. And I suggest you all find a seat, because you are going to need it." Mr. Henderson cleared his throat. The sound was like a dry twig snapping in a dead forest. He broke the wax seal on the heavy cream envelope with a deliberate slowness that made Vivica twitch. She was sitting on the edge of the sofa now, wringing her hands, her eyes fixed on that paper like a starving dog looking at a steak. She was already spending the money in her head. I could see it in the greedy tilt of her chin. She was probably imagining a new Cadillac to replace the one Chad had crashed, or perhaps a trip to Vegas to wash away the stress of waiting for her mother to die. I, Rose Jenkins, being of sound mind and body, do hereby declare this to be my last will and testament. Mr. Henderson began, his voice rolling over the hushed crowd. To my only daughter, Vivica Jenkins. Vivica straightened up, smoothing her skirt. She shot a look of pure triumph at me, a smirk playing on her lips. See, she seemed to say, blood is thicker than water. You are nothing. She leaned forward, eager to hear the list of bank accounts and property deeds she felt entitled to. Vivica, Mr. Henderson read, pausing to look over his glasses at her, you have always been the loudest voice in the choir on Sundays. You quote scripture to justify your judgments, and you use the church as a shield for your greed. Therefore, I leave you the tools to save your soul, since you have clearly lost your way. Vivica's smile faltered. A line of confusion appeared between her eyebrows. What does that mean? She whispered, her voice barely audible. I leave you my collection of vintage Mahalia Jackson gospel records, Mr. Henderson continued without missing a beat. And my personal leather-bound King James Bible, the one with my handwritten notes in the margins. I suggest you read the passages on greed and theft, Vivica. Read them until they sink in. I leave you nothing else. No money, no property, no jewelry, just the word of God. Because that is what you need most. The silence that followed was heavy enough to crush a man. It pressed against the eardrums, sucking the oxygen out of the room. Then Vivica let out a sound that started as a whimper and ended as a shriek. She leaped up from the sofa, knocking over a side table, sending a lamp crashing to the floor. Is that a joke? She screamed. Her face contorted into a mask of pure, ugly rage. Spittle flew from her mouth as she advanced on the lawyer. A Bible. Old records. I took care of her for 5 years. I changed her diapers. I fed her. I sacrificed my life for that ungrateful old woman, and she leaves me a book. She lunged toward Mr. Henderson, grabbing the edge of his expensive jacket with claw-like fingers. Read it again. You skipped a page. Where is the money? Where is the insurance policy? I know she had a policy. I paid the premiums with her checkbook. Mr. Henderson peeled her fingers off his suit with a look of extreme distaste, brushing the fabric as if she had left a stain. There is no mistake. Vivica Rose was very specific. She knew exactly what you were doing those 5 years. She knew about the nurses you hired from the back of Craigslist, who slept while she cried for water. She knew about the groceries you bought that never ended up in her fridge. She left you exactly what she thought you deserved. I will sue. Vivica howled, spinning around to face the room, her eyes wild and bloodshot. This is undue influence. That girl Nia poisoned her mind. Mama loved me. I am her daughter. She would never do this to me. She grabbed the heavy leather Bible that Mr. Henderson had placed on the table and threw it across the room with all her strength. It hit the wall with a heavy thud, sliding down behind the television. You see, I said from my corner, my voice cutting through her hysteria like a razor blade. Big Mama knew you better than anyone, Auntie. You just threw away the only thing she thought could save you. And you proved her point perfectly. You do not want her love, you just wanted her wallet. And now you have neither. Mr. Henderson turned the heavy parchment page with a crisp snap that sounded like a whip crack in the silent room. He adjusted his spectacles and shifted his gaze to Keisha. She was standing near the window, posing with her hand on her hip as if she were waiting for a red carpet photo op instead of a reading of a will. She smirked at me, a petty little twist of her lips that screamed, I won and you lost. She had always been the golden child, the one who got the new clothes while I got the hand-me-downs, the one who got the praise while I got the lectures. She was convinced that Big Mama loved her best, simply because she had stayed behind to spend the money I had been forced to leave. And to my granddaughter Keisha Vance. Mr. Henderson read, his voice devoid of any warmth. I know you have had your eye on my vintage Mercedes-Benz for years. You have spoken often about how good you would look, driving it to your brunch dates, and how it would elevate your status at that hair salon you spend half your life in. Keisha, clapped her hands together, a greedy little squeal escaping her throat. "I knew it!" she exclaimed, looking at Chad, her eyes shining with avarice. "I told you, baby, we are getting the Benz. That car is worth $80,000 easy. We can trade it in or keep it for the image." Mr. Henderson cleared his throat, silencing her celebration. However, he continued reading. "I have watched you grow into a woman who values the appearance of wealth over the labor required to create it. You drive cars you cannot afford. You wear clothes you did not pay for. And you look down on those who work with their hands. Therefore, I am not leaving you the Mercedes. That vehicle has already been donated to the church charity auction." Keisha's face froze. Her smile dropped like a stone. "What?" she whispered, her voice trembling with disbelief. Instead, Mr. Henderson read on, his voice getting louder over her rising panic. "I leave you my 1998 Cadillac DeVille. The one sitting on blocks in the back of the garage with the blown transmission and the rusted quarter panels. I leave this to you, specifically because it is broken just like your work ethic. If you want to drive a luxury car, Keisha, you will have to fix this one yourself. You will have to get grease under those acrylic nails and learn what it means to build something from the ground up. I pray that the sweat equity you put into that old car will teach you the lesson I failed to teach you while I was alive, that you cannot ride through life on someone else. Gas tank." The silence that followed was absolute. It was the silence of a bomb having detonated, but the shockwave not yet hitting. Then the scream tore through the room. It was a primal sound of pure entitlement being denied. Keisha grabbed a crystal glass of sweet tea from the side table and hurled it across the room. It smashed against the floral wallpaper, leaving a dripping brown stain that looked like a wound. "You hateful old witch!" Keisha shrieked, stomping her foot like a toddler having a meltdown. She hated me. She always hated me because I was beautiful. She was jealous. A rusted Cadillac. "I do not want that piece of junk. I want my money. I want the Mercedes. You stole it. This lawyer stole it, and gave it to the church." She spun around, her eyes wild, searching for something else to break. She grabbed a porcelain figurine off the mantel and smashed it onto the hearth, shattering the face of a shepherd boy. "I am glad she is dead." Keisha screamed, tears of rage streaming down her face, ruining her makeup. "I am glad she suffered. She deserved it for doing this to me." Chad tried to grab her arm to calm her down, but she shoved him away with surprising strength. "Get off me, you loser," she yelled at him. "You said we were getting the house. You said we were getting the cars. You promised me everything was taken care of. Look at this. We are getting trash. We are getting nothing." I watched from my corner, my face impassive. My forensic mind noted the destruction of property, adding it to the mental tally of damages. But my heart felt a strange vindication. Big Mama had played the long game. She knew Keisha would never appreciate a gift she did not earn. Giving her a broken car was not just a punishment, it was a mirror. She was forcing Keisha to look at her own reflection, a luxury shell with a broken engine inside going absolutely nowhere. Mr. Henderson waited for the echoes of Keisha's tantrum to fade into the humid air. He did not raise his voice. He did not need to. The sheer weight of the document in his hands demanded silence. He looked over the rim of his spectacles at the devastation in the room. Vivica hyperventilating on the sofa, Keisha sobbing over her broken dreams, and Chad staring at the floor like a man on death row. Then he turned his eyes to me, and for the first time since he entered the house, the stern lines of his face softened. And finally he read his voice, dropping to a register that commanded absolute attention. "To my granddaughter, Nia Jenkins." The room went so quiet, you could hear the dust settling. Even the air conditioner seemed to pause in anticipation. I felt my breath catch in my throat. I had expected nothing. I had come here to stop a crime, not to receive a reward. I gripped the handle of my bag, bracing myself for a final lesson, or perhaps a small token of remembrance. To Nia, I leave everything else. The words hung in the air, heavy and absolute. I leave the family estate located at 450 Martin Luther King Drive, including all furnishings, antiques, and personal effects contained therein. I leave the 50 acres of undeveloped land in Cobb County. I leave my entire investment portfolio currently held by Vanguard, and I leave the entirety of the Jenkins Family Trust, valued at $5 million. My knees went weak. I had to lean against the wall to keep from sliding to the floor. $5 million, the land, the house. It was not just an inheritance, it was an empire. It was the culmination of generations of struggle and saving, all placed into my hands. Vivica made a choking sound like she was drowning on dry land. Chad Head snapped up, his eyes wide with horror and greed. Realizing the magnitude of what he had just tried to steal, Mr. Henderson continued reading the reasoning. Big Mama had dictated, his voice trembling slightly with emotion. I leave this to Nia. Not because she is the smartest, though she is, and not because she is the most successful, though she is that too. I leave this to her because in the 14 years since she was driven from this house, she was the only one who ever called just to ask how I was doing. She was the only one who never asked me for a loan. She was the only one who never asked if I had written a will. She sent me flowers on my birthday every year with her own money. Money she earned by working 3 jobs while putting herself through school. She loved me, not for what I could give her. Tears blurred my vision, hot and fast. I remembered those phone calls. I remembered sitting on the floor of my studio apartment in Chicago, eating instant noodles so I could afford to send Big Mama a bouquet of lilies. I remembered her voice, weak and crackly over the line, telling me about her garden, telling me to keep my head up, telling me she was proud of me. I thought she was just a lonely old woman, missing her granddaughter. I had no idea she was watching. I had no idea she was keeping score. Therefore, Mr. Henderson concluded, closing the folder with a finality that felt like a gavel strike. I appoint Nia Jenkins as the sole executor of my estate and the new chairperson of the Rose Jenkins Community Foundation, effective immediately. This is my final wish. The silence stretched out long and thin until it snapped. I looked at my family. They were not looking at me with anger anymore. They were looking at me with terror. They realized in that moment that the power had shifted. The girl they had thrown away was now the woman who held the keys to their kingdom. And I was not just the owner of the house they were standing in. I was the owner of their fate. The heavy silence that followed the reading of the will was shattered by a sound like a wounded animal. Chad slammed his fist onto the antique dining table with enough force to make the china rattle. He stood up, his chair screeching backward across the hardwood floor, his face a mask of absolute terror. The arrogance that he had worn like a cheap suit when he walked in was gone, replaced by the raw panic of a man watching his execution date arrive. "No," he shouted, his voice cracking and high-pitched. "That is impossible. You cannot give it to her. I already took the money. I took the deposit. Do you hear me? I took $50,000 cash from the Apex Group. They do not do refunds." Vivica blinked, her brain struggling to catch up with the new reality pouring out of her son-in-law. "What are you talking about, Chad? What $50,000? You said you were handling the estate. You said you were wealthy. I lied, you stupid old woman." Chad screamed, spinning on her, sweat pouring down his face, ruining his spray tan. "I am broke. I have been broke for 2 years. I owe everyone. The bookies, the banks, and now I owe the Apex Group. I took their deposit last week because I was sure we would get the deed. Today, I spent it, Vivica. I spent it all on back payments for the Audi and the crypto losses. I do not have it anymore." Keisha let out a strangled gasp, clutching her chest, as if she were the one having a heart attack. "You spent 50 grand in a week. You told me that money was a bonus from work. You told me we were going to Cabo." "There is no Cabo," Chad yelled, saliva flying from his mouth. "There is only concrete shoes if I do not deliver this property." He turned his wild eyes toward me, and for a second, I thought he might attack again. But then his knees buckled, and he collapsed onto the floor. Not in a faint, but in a pathetic heap of begging. He crawled toward me on his hands and knees, his expensive suit dragging through the spilled sweet tea on the rug. "Nia, please," he begged, reaching out to grab the hem of my pants, but stopping when the security guards took a step forward. "You have to help me. You have to sign the house over, or at least sell it to them. I can broker the deal, we can split the money. Just give them the land." "They will kill me, Nia. These aren't regular developers, they are animals. They said if I do not have the title by Monday, they are coming for me." I looked down at him with a mixture of disgust and pity. He was pathetic, a man who had built his entire life on lies and leverage, now crumbling at the feet of the woman he tried to rob. Vivica and Keisha stood frozen, their faces pale as they processed the truth. The rich white savior they thought they had married into the family was nothing more than a desperate con man drowning in debt. They had bet everything on him, ostracizing me, abusing Big Mama, hoping for a payday that was never coming. "You look surprised." "Auntie?" I said, my voice cutting through Chad, sobbing. "Did you really think a successful real estate developer drives a leased car and borrows money from his wife grandmother? Chad is not a businessman, he is a gambler who ran out of luck, and now he wants me to pay his marker." Chad looked up at me, tears streaming down his face mixing with the snot running from his nose. "Nia, please, we are family by marriage. Do not let them hurt me. Just sign the paper. It is just a house. It means nothing to you. You have money. You do not need this." I took a step back, removing myself from his reach. "It means everything to me, Chad," I said coldly. "Because it was Big Mama home, and I will not let it be turned into a strip mall to save your kneecaps. You made a deal with the devil. Now you can pay him yourself." When Chad realized that his tears were landing on dry ground, his demeanor shifted with terrifying speed. He stopped sobbing abruptly. The pathetic beggar vanished, and in his place stood the cornered rat baring its teeth. He wiped his snotty nose on the sleeve of his expensive suit jacket and stood up, his movements jerky and uncoordinated. He adjusted his collar, trying to summon the ghosts of his former arrogance, but his eyes remained wild and dangerous. "You think you are untouchable because you have a piece of paper," he spat, his voice dropping to a low, venomous growl. "You are not in Chicago anymore, Nia. This is Georgia. We do things differently down here. I play golf with the sheriff every Sunday. I donate to his re-election campaign. All I have to do is make one phone call and you will be pulled over 5 miles from here." He took a step closer, ignoring the security guards who tensed ready to intercept. "They will find drugs in your car, or maybe a weapon, and you will disappear into the county jail system so fast, no one will even know you are gone. Do you understand me? Accidents happen all the time to people who do not know their place." The threat hung heavy in the air, thick with the promise of corruption and violence. Chad was not just talking about legal trouble, he was talking about using the law as a weapon to erase me. It was a tactic I had seen before, used by men who thought their connections made them gods in their little kingdoms. Vivica, seeing her son-in-law switch tactics, decided to double down on the aggression. She marched over to stand beside him, her face twisted into a mask of righteous indignation. "He is right," she screeched, pointing a shaking finger at me. "You think you can just waltz in here and steal my inheritance? I will sue you, Nia. I will sue you for elder abuse. I will tell the courts how you manipulated a dying woman, how you poisoned her mind against her own daughter." She turned to the crowd of church members seeking their validation. "She took advantage of Mama when she was weak. That will is a fraud. She probably forced Mama to sign it just like she accused us of doing. We will tie this property up in litigation for decades," Chad sneered, sensing he had an ally again. "You will never see a dime of it. The legal fees alone will bankrupt you. But if you sign it over to me now, I can make the problems go away. I can keep you out of jail. Because if you do not cooperate, I promise you, Naya, you are not leaving Atlanta in one piece." I am going to bury you under so many lawsuits and criminal charges you will wish you stayed in the cold. I looked at them, really looked at them. A desperate con man, threatening violence, and a bitter old woman threatening legal action. They were loud, they were aggressive, and they were completely unaware of who they were dealing with. They thought I was just a lucky granddaughter who got a windfall. They did not know that threats were just noise to me. They did not know that I dealt with cartels and embezzlers who made Chad look like a choir boy. They thought they were the predators, but they had just walked into the cage of a much bigger beast. I started laughing. It was a low, dry sound at first, but it grew until it filled the tense silence of the living room. It was not a laugh of amusement. It was the laugh of a wolf watching a rabbit try to threaten it with a carrot. Chad stopped his posturing, his face twisting in confusion. Vivica looked at me as if I had finally cracked under the pressure, losing my mind just like she always claimed I would, but I was not crazy. I was just finished playing by their rules. You find this funny? Chad barked, his fists clenching at his sides. You think prison is a joke? You think losing your freedom is something to laugh about? I shook my head, wiping a tear of mirth from the corner of my eye. No, Chad, I do not think prison is a joke. I think you are a joke. You talk about the sheriff like he is a god. You talk about your golf buddies like they run the world. You have absolutely no idea who you are standing in front of right now. Do you? I walked over to the antique coffee table, pushing aside a tray of stale finger sandwiches to make space. I set my Louis Vuitton bag down with a heavy thud and unzipped it. The sound was sharp and decisive, like a body bag being closed. I reached inside and pulled out my laptop. It was not a consumer model. It was a ruggedized, high-performance machine, the kind used by federal agents in the field. I opened it, the screen glowing with a cold blue light that reflected in my eyes. Vivica stepped forward, her curiosity warring with her fear. What is that? What are you doing? You cannot just play on your computer while we are discussing legal matters. I am not playing Auntie. I said, my fingers flying across the keyboard, entering complex passwords with practiced speed. You asked who I am. You asked what right I have to be here. You called me a thief. You called me a fraud. You threatened to erase me. I looked up, meeting her gaze with a stare so intense she actually flinched. Let me introduce myself properly. I am not just Nia, the granddaughter you threw away. I am a senior forensic accountant based out of Chicago. I do not do taxes for small businesses. I do not help people balance their checkbooks. I work with the Department of Justice and private equity firms to hunt down complex financial fraud. I trace assets hidden in offshore shell companies. I unravel Ponzi schemes, and I find the money that men like Chad try desperately to hide. The room went dead silent again, but this time the quality of the silence was different. It was the silence of realization dawning. The church mothers leaned forward, their fans stilled. Chad's face went from red to a pasty gray, his eyes darting to the screen of my laptop. You see? I continued, my voice steady and professional, devoid of the emotion I had shown earlier. My job is to send people to prison, people who think they are smarter than the system. People who think they can steal from the vulnerable and get away with it. And usually I have to dig through thousands of documents to find the smoking gun. But you three, you made it so easy. I stood up and walked over to the massive 65-inch television mounted above the fireplace. I pulled an HDMI cable from my bag and plugged it into the side of my laptop. The screen flickered to life, mirroring my desktop. It was a chaotic web of spreadsheets, bank statements, and surveillance photos, organized into folders labeled with their names. I did not just come back for the funeral, I said, turning to face them. My silhouette framed by the glowing data on the screen. I have been investigating this family for 3 months. Big Mama called me in August. She suspected something was wrong. She gave me power of attorney to audit her accounts, weeks before she died. And what I found was not just mismanagement, it was systematic theft. So before you threaten me with the Sheriff Chad, Why do we not take a look at what I found? Because I promise you, the sheriff is going to be very interested in this presentation. The screen flickered to life, casting a harsh blue glow over the living room. Everyone turned their eyes to the 65-inch television mounted above the fireplace. It was no longer showing the family photo slideshow. Vivica had carefully curated to make herself look like the grieving, dutiful daughter. Instead, it displayed a high-resolution scan of a bank statement, magnified so even the people in the back could read the fine print. I stood next to the television, my laser pointer cutting through the dim light. Let us start with you, Auntie Vivica, I said, my voice calm and authoritative. You spent the last hour telling everyone in this room how you sacrificed your life to care for Big Mama. You told the church members you were struggling to pay for her medication. You told the neighbors you had to cut back on groceries because her pension was just not enough. You made yourself a martyr. Vivica shifted uncomfortably on the sofa, her eyes darting between me and the screen. I did, she sputtered. I gave up everything for her. I clicked the remote and a new slide appeared, highlighting a series of monthly withdrawals in bright red. This is Big Mama's primary checking account, the one where her Social Security checks and her late husband pension were deposited automatically. Every month on the 3rd, like clockwork, money was transferred out. Not to a pharmacy, not to a grocery store, but to a PayPal account linked to the email address. God-fearing woman. 55@yahoo.com. That is your email address, is it not? Auntie Vivica mouth opened, but no sound came out. She looked like a fish gasping for air. I clicked again, revealing the transaction history of that PayPal account. The list scrolled down the screen, endless and damning. It was not a list of household expenses. It was a list of payments to Golden Nugget Online, Casino, BetMGM, and half a dozen offshore poker sites. You were not buying medicine, Vivica. You were playing virtual slots. You were betting on horses in digital races while your mother was lying in the next room wearing threadbare nightgowns. The room erupted in gasps. Mrs. Gable, one of the church mothers, covered her mouth with a gloved hand, looking at Vivica with pure horror. You gambled away. Rose money, she whispered. I turned to face the room, ensuring everyone heard the final number. In total, over the last 5 years, Vivica embezzled exactly $150,000 from her own mother. That includes the reimbursement checks from her health insurance provider checks that were supposed to pay for her physical therapy. You cashed them and deposited them straight into your gambling account. Vivica stood up, her face twisting into a mask of desperate denial. It was a loan, she screamed, her voice cracking. I was going to win it back. I had a system. I was doing it for us. To build a nest egg. You stole $150,000 from a dying woman. I interrupted, my voice cutting her off like a guillotine. You let her suffer. You let her go without proper care so you could chase a jackpot that never came, and you have the audacity to stand here in her house wearing a dress bought with her money and call me a thief. But you did not just steal from your mother, did you, Vivica? You stole from the Lord too. I clicked the next slide on the presentation, and the gasps from the church mothers in the corner turned into horrified shrieks. The screen displayed a complex spreadsheet titled Mount Zion Baptist Church Building, Fund Ledger, Fiscal Year 2023. Vivica's face went from pale to ash gray. She took a stumbling step back, her hand clutching her chest. You have no right, she wheezed. That is confidential church business. I am the treasurer. It is my job to manage those funds and manage them. You did, I replied, my voice dripping with ice directly into the dealership account of Buckhead Luxury Autos. I pointed the laser at a line item highlighted in yellow. On February 14th, while the congregation was raising money to fix the leaking roof in the sanctuary, a transfer of $45,000 was made. The ledger says roof repair materials, but the routing number goes straight to the finance department of the car lot, where Keisha bought that white Range Rover parked in the driveway. I turned to look at Keisha, who was suddenly trying to make herself very small in her seat. You told everyone that car was a gift from Chad because his business was booming. But Chad has not closed a deal in 6 months. That car was paid for by the tithes of widows and pensioners. Keisha. The money Mrs. Gable gave from her Social Security check. The money Big Mama put in the plate every Sunday, even when she could barely walk. That is what you are driving around town in. Keisha looked at her mother, betrayal warring with greed in her eyes. You said it was an inheritance advance, she whispered. You told me Grandma wanted me to have a safe car for the baby. She lied to you, Keisha, just like she lied to everyone else, I cut in. But here is the part that is going to hurt the most. Auntie, I pulled my phone from my pocket and held it up the screen glowing in the dim room. I have a draft email open right now. It is addressed to Bishop Thomas, the Board of Deacons, and every single member of the church mailing list. Attached to it is this spreadsheet, the bank records, and the invoice for the Range Rover. Vivica's eyes bulged. She looked like she was having a seizure. No, she begged, her voice a high, thin wail. You cannot do that, Nia. You cannot send that. It would kill me. My reputation. I am the head of the usher board. I have been in that church for 40 years. They will excommunicate me. They will ruin my name. I took a step closer, smelling her fear. It was stronger than the fried chicken now. You should have thought about your reputation before you dipped your hands into the offering plate. Vivica, you are terrified of prison. But we both know what you are really afraid of. You are afraid of walking into church next Sunday and seeing every back turn on you. You are afraid of the whispers. You are afraid of losing the only thing you have ever truly cared about, which is looking down on everyone else. Mrs. Gable stood up from the sofa, her floral dress rustling in the silence. She walked over to Vivica, her face set in a mask of absolute disappointment. Vivica, she said, her voice shaking with suppressed rage. I trusted you, I defended you when people said you were spending too much, and you stole from God. Shame on you. Vivica fell to her knees sobbing, uncontrollably reaching out for Mrs. Gable's hem, but the older woman pulled away in disgust. I watched the scene with zero sympathy. This was the woman who had thrown me out on the street, who had called me a thief for 14 years, and now she was on the floor broken, not by the law, but by her own vanity. I looked down at my phone, my thumb hovering over the send button. I am going to give you a choice, Auntie, I said, my voice hard. You can sign a full confession right now admitting to the embezzlement of Big Mama's funds and the church funds along with a repayment plan, or I hit send and by tomorrow morning, you will be the most hated woman in Atlanta. What is it going to be? Your pride or your freedom? Do not think for a second that you are safe just because your mother is on the floor. Keisha, I said, turning the laser pointer toward my cousin, who was currently trying to hide behind her husband. Her arrogance had vanished, replaced by the trembling fear of a child caught with her hand in the cookie jar. But in this case, the cookie jar was an unconscious woman bank account, and the hand was criminal. I clicked the remote and the spreadsheet on the television screen vanished, replaced by a grainy black and white video feed. The timestamp in the corner read, September 23rd, 2:30 a.m., 2 weeks before Big Mama passed away. The angle was high and wide, capturing the entire hospital room. It was footage from a hidden camera. I had hired a private investigator to install inside the smoke detector the moment Big Mama told me she suspected someone was tampering with her phone. In the video, Big Mama was asleep in her hospital bed, her chest rising and falling in the slow rhythm of the sedated. A ventilator hummed in the background. The door to the room creaked open slowly and Keisha slipped inside. She was wearing a hoodie pulled up over her head, but her face was clearly visible in the glow of the hallway lights. She did not go to the bedside to hold her grandmother's hand. She did not go to smooth her brow or whisper words of comfort. She went straight for the nightstand, The entire room watched in breathless silence as the Keisha on the screen picked up Big Mama iPhone. She looked over her shoulder, checking the hallway one last time, ensuring the nurses were busy at their station. Then she did something that made the church mothers gasp in collective horror. She reached under the thin hospital sheet and pulled out Big Mama. Limp hand. She took her grandmother thumb and pressed it against the phone sensor, unlocking the device. "That is a lie," Keisha screamed, her voice shrill and desperate. "That is not what it looks like. She told me to do it. She wanted me to buy things for the funeral. She wanted me to look good." I ignored her, keeping my eyes fixed on the screen. "Watch closely," I said. The video showed Keisha tapping furiously on the screen. She was not buying funeral clothes. She opened the banking app, transferred money, and then switched to a shopping app. "I have the digital forensic report to match this video, Keisha. At 2:35 a.m., you transferred $5,000 from her savings to your personal checking account. At 2:38 a.m., you purchased a Gucci Dionysus handbag from the Neiman Marcus app. The same handbag you posted on Instagram the next day with the caption, 'Blessed, that is not being blessed.' Keisha," I said, my voice dropping to a cold whisper. "That is identity theft. That is wire fraud. That is elder abuse in the first degree. You physically manipulated the body of an incapacitated woman to rob her blind. You did not just steal her money, you stole her dignity. You treated her like an ATM while she was fighting for her life." Keisha was sobbing now. Ugly, heaving sobs that smeared her mascara down her cheeks. "It was a loan," she wailed. "I was going to pay it back." "You cannot pay it back with money you do not have," I countered. "And this was not a one-time incident. I have 12 more videos just like this one over the last 6 months while Big Mama was in us. And out of the hospital you stole a grand total of $45,000. You bought shoes, you bought purses, you paid for bottle service at the club, all while your grandmother was dying. And because you used the internet to make those purchases across state lines, you just committed a federal crime. This is not just a family dispute anymore. This is 10 years in federal prison." I looked at Chad, who was staring at his wife with a look of absolute revulsion, accusing her with his eyes, even though he was just as guilty. The house of cards had not just fallen, it had been incinerated, and I was the one holding the match. "You look awfully high and mighty for a man standing on a trapdoor." "Chad," I said, turning the laser pointer away from the sobbing Keisha and aiming it directly at the center of his chest. He flinched as if the red dot burned him physically. The disgust on his face regarding his wife's theft was almost convincing. But I knew better. I knew that while Keisha was stealing thousands at the bedside, Chad was stealing hundreds of thousands at the bank. "Do not look at me like that," he stammered, backing away until he hit the wall. "I did not touch her bank accounts. I did not know she was doing that. I am a businessman, not a thief." "You are right, Chad," I said, my voice smooth and dangerous. "You are not a thief. You are a fraudster, and there is a distinction." I clicked the remote and the screen changed again, displaying a complex loan document from SunTrust Bank, titled Home Equity Line of Credit. The room murmured in confusion. Mrs. Gable adjusted her glasses, squinting at the screen. "That says $200,000, she whispered. "Who took out a loan on Rose House?" "I did. I answered for her. Or rather, Chad did. Using Big Mama name." I walked over to the table and picked up a notarized document, holding it up for the room to see. 6 months ago. Chad walked into a branch manager office with a power of attorney document. He claimed Big Mama wanted to leverage the equity in the guest house, the carriage house out back, that she had renovated for visiting pastors. He claimed she wanted to invest in his real estate ventures. Chad's face was slick with sweat. "Now, I had permission," he lied, his voice high and thin. "She wanted me to grow the family wealth. I was investing it." "Investing," I repeated with a dry laugh. Is that what we are calling it now? I clicked the remote one more time. The loan document disappeared, replaced by a series of screenshots from a cryptocurrency exchange platform. The graph on the screen was a jagged red line plunging straight down into the abyss. Ladies and gentlemen, meet Chad Investment Strategy. I pointed to the screen showing the transaction history. On the same day the $200,000 hit the account, Chad transferred the entire amount to an unregulated crypto wallet. He bought into 3 different speculative coins that promised 100 times returns. He thought he was going to turn Big Mama equity into $20 million and be the hero of Atlanta. And what happened, Chad? I asked, stepping closer to him so I could see the panic in his eyes. Tell them what happened to the money. Because according to this statement, as of this morning, your portfolio balance is exactly $42.16. You lost everything. You took a piece of this historic property, a piece of Black history in this city, and you gambled it away on internet magic. Money! Chad slid down the wall, his legs no longer able to support him. It was a sure thing, he whispered to the floor. It was supposed to moon. I was going to pay it back with interest. I was going to fix everything. But you did not fix anything, I said, my voice hard and unforgiving. You broke it. And here is the part that everyone needs to hear. The loan payments on that $200,000. They have not been made in 4 months. Since you lost the money, you have been hiding the notices burying the mail. I pulled a red bordered envelope from my bag and tossed it onto his lap. It is a Notice of default, Chad. The bank is initiating foreclosure proceedings on the guest house. They are coming to seize a part of this estate in 30 days because of you. You did not just try to sell the main house to save your own skin. You already sold the guest house down the river and you lost it all. Vivica let out a wail of despair, realizing that even the property she thought she was fighting for was already compromised. The church mothers looked at Chad with pure revulsion. He sat there staring at the foreclosure notice, the physical proof of his failure resting heavily on his knees. He had gambled with a legacy he did not build, and he had lost. Now that we have established that your daughter is a federal criminal and your son-in-law is a bankrupt fraudster, let us return to the beginning, Auntie, I said, turning away from the wreckage of Chad and Keisha to face the architect of my misery. Vivica was sitting on the edge of the sofa, clutching her chest, trying to make herself look small, trying to blend into the upholstery. But there was nowhere left to hide. The spotlight was on her and it was blinding. I walked over to her, my steps slow and deliberate. I stopped right in front of her, forcing her to look up at me. You have been very quiet about the financial crimes, Vivica. But we both know money is not the only thing you stole. You stole my life. You stole my reputation, and you stole the last 14 years I could have had with Big Mama. I pointed a finger at her left hand, which she had buried deep in the folds of her dress, seeking to conceal the evidence. Take it off, I commanded, my voice ringing with an authority that made the church mothers straighten in their seats. Vivica shook her head, her eyes wide and wet with panic. I told you, she stammered. It is a gift. It is mine. If it is a gift from Chad, as you claimed, then why are you hiding it? I asked, leaning down until our faces were inches apart. Why are you terrified to show it to the room? Take it off, Vivica? Or do I need to call the police over here to remove it as evidence of stolen property? Vivica looked at the police officer standing by the door who was watching the proceedings with grim interest. She looked at Mr. Henderson, who nodded slowly, confirming the threat. With a trembling hand, she pulled her left hand out from the fabric. The diamond caught the light, winking mockingly at everyone in the room. She twisted the ring, pulling it over her knuckle. It resisted, as if the jewelry itself knew it did not belong to her. Finally, it popped free. Read the inscription, I said, holding out my hand, palm open. Read what it says on the inside of the band. Vivica dropped the ring into my hand, avoiding my skin as if I were contagious. I held it up to the light, squinting at the worn gold interior. It says R plus O. Forever, 1962. I read aloud. My voice trembling with suppressed rage. Rose and Otis, Big Mama and Granddaddy. That was the ring Granddaddy proposed with, the ring you told everyone I stole when I was 18. You filed a police report, Vivica. You told Big Mama I pawned it for drugs. You watched her cry. You watched her throw me out of this house. And the whole time it was in your pocket. The room gasped. Mrs. Gable stood up, her face twisted in disgust. You liar, she hissed. You told us you saw Nia take it. You swore on the Bible. Vivica broke down then. It wasn't a weep of sorrow. It was the ugly sobbing of a cornered animal. I had to, she wailed, looking around the room for sympathy that wasn't there. Mama loved her too much. She was going to give Nia the house. She was going to give her everything, just because she was smart, just because she went to college. I was the one who stayed. I was the one who was here. But Mama only had eyes for Nia. I had to get rid of her. It was the only way to make Mama see me. There it was. The naked, ugly truth stripping away the last shred of her dignity. She hadn't protected the family, she had destroyed it out of jealousy. She had framed a teenage girl and exiled her own flesh and blood because she couldn't handle being second best. I closed my fist around the ring, feeling the cold metal bite into my palm. You wanted her love so bad you stole her ring to get it. I said, my voice quiet and lethal. And in the end you got neither. You died to her the day you lied about me. And now everyone knows exactly what you are. You aren't a victim, Vivica. You are a predator who ate her own young. The unity of the grieving family evaporated the moment the ring hit my palm. The facade of the grieving daughter, the supportive son-in-law, and the dutiful grandchild shattered, leaving only 3 desperate people looking for a scapegoat to pin their crimes on. Chad scrambled to his feet, wiping the dust from his knees, and pointed a shaking finger at his wife. "It is her fault!" he shouted, his voice cracking with hysteria. "I never wanted to take that loan out on the guest house. I told her we could not afford it, but she would not stop spending. She needed the Range Rover. She needed the trip to Tulum. She needed the private stylist for the funeral. Do you know how much she spent on shoes last month? $12,000. I had to steal the money just to keep the lights on because she drains every account I open." Keisha's eyes went wide with betrayal. She shoved Chad hard enough to make him stumble back against the wall. "You lying snake!" she screamed. "You told me you were handling it. You told me your investments were paying off. You said, baby, get whatever you want. You deserve it. I did not know you were stealing from Grandma. I thought you were actually successful. You lied to me. You told me you were a developer, but you are just a broke loser with a gambling addiction." "Do not talk to me about addiction," Chad spat back, face purple with rage. "You are the one who steals pills from your mother's purse. You are the one who cannot walk past a Neiman Marcus without maxing out a credit card. I ruined my life trying to keep you in the lifestyle you think you are entitled to, and for what? So you could cheat on me with your personal trainer." The room gasped collectively. The church mothers were now watching this spectacle with the same rapt attention they usually reserved for the Sunday sermon. This was better than reality television. This was the total collapse of the Jenkins family dynasty, live and in color. Keisha turned on her mother, looking for a shield but finding only another target. "It is your fault, Mama," she yelled, pointing at Vivica, who was still clutching her chest on the sofa. "You raised me this way. You told me never to work. You told me to find a man to pay the bills. You said marry White Keisha. They have better credit. You picked him out. You introduced us at the country club mixer. I wanted to go to nursing school, but you said it would ruin my nails." Vivica straightened up, her indignation momentarily overriding her shame. "Do not you dare blame me for your laziness," she hissed. "You are a grown woman, Keisha. I taught you to have standards, not to be a parasite. I told you to marry a provider, not a con artist. Look at him, he cannot even keep a roof over his own head. I knew he was trash the moment he asked to borrow money for the wedding ring." "You chose him," Chad yelled, interrupting her. You pushed us to get married because you wanted to brag to your church friends about your son-in-law, the developer. You knew I was leveraging debt. You helped me forge the signature on the home equity line of credit. You held the paper steady while I traced it. Vivica, liar! Vivica shrieked, lunging at him. I did no such thing. You tricked me. You said it was standard paperwork. I stood back, watching the circular firing squad with cold fascination. They were tearing each other apart, piece by piece, exposing every secret, every lie, every crime they had committed together. It was a dark comedy of errors, a masterclass in dysfunction. They were so busy trying to drown each other to save themselves that they did not realize they were all already underwater. Mr. Henderson leaned over to me, his voice a low rumble amidst the screaming. I believe this is what they call a confession. In 3 parts, he murmured. I nodded, crossing my arms. It is, I said. But wait. There is more. They have not even gotten to the part where I tell them they are all homeless. Yet, I let the silence stretch out until it was heavy enough to choke on. The only sound in the room was the ragged breathing of 3 people who had just realized they were standing on a trap door with the rope around their necks. I walked over to the television and yanked the HDMI cable out of my laptop. The screen went black, plunging the room back into the dim afternoon light. The show was over. It was time for the sentencing. Are you quite finished? I asked, my voice cutting through the humidity like a glacial wind. You have spent the last 10 minutes blaming each other for crimes you all participated in, but the district attorney does not care whose idea it was. He only cares about who signed the checks and who moved the money, and right now I have enough evidence on this hard drive to put all 3 of you away for a combined total of 45 years. Vivica flinched, her eyes darting to the police officer standing stoically by the front door. She knew I was not bluffing. She knew that in my line of work, I did not make threats. I made promises. I walked back to my Louis Vuitton bag and pulled out 3 thick stapled documents. I tossed them onto the coffee table with a heavy thud. The sound echoed like a gunshot, making Chad jump. You have 2 options, I said, holding up 2 fingers. Option A is the easiest for me. I hand this laptop over to that officer. He arrests you right now for elder abuse, wire fraud, bank fraud, and grand larceny. You spend the next decade in a federal cell wearing orange jumpsuits and eating slop. You lose everything: your freedom, your reputation, and your future. I paused, letting the image sink in. I watched Keisha begin to tremble, her lower lip quivering like a child. Option B is the mercy option, I continued, pointing to the stack of papers on the table. These are confessions of judgment prepared by my legal team in Chicago. They are legally binding acknowledgments of debt. If you sign these, you are admitting to every single dollar you stole. You are agreeing to a repayment plan that will garnish your wages for the next 20 years. You will pay back every cent with interest. Vivica reached for the papers, her hand shaking so bad she could barely hold the paper. What happens if we sign? She whispered. If you sign, I will not press criminal charges today. I said, my voice hard as iron. I will allow you to walk out of here without handcuffs. But there is a condition. You have exactly 1 hour to vacate this property. You take nothing but the clothes on your backs and your personal toiletries. No furniture, no electronics, no family heirlooms. You leave your keys on this table and you get out of my house and you never come back. Chad stared at the document in front of him, his eyes scanning the legal jargon. This admits to the forgery, he croaked. If I sign this, I am admitting I committed a felony. Yes, Chad, I replied. But it is a private admission. If you sign it, stays in my safe as insurance. If you miss a single payment, if you come near me, if you try to contact the Apex group again, I take this document straight to the FBI, and they will not need a trial because you will have already confessed. So what is it going to be? The nice soft bed in prison, or a lifetime of debt in the street? I looked at my watch, checking the time with deliberate slowness. You have 60 seconds to decide. After that, the offer expires, and I tell the officer to cuff you. I suggest you pick up a pen, because the clock is ticking and I am running out of patience. The room was so quiet you could hear the scratch of the pen on paper before it even touched the surface. Vivica was the first to break. She looked at the police officer who had taken a step forward, his hand resting casually near his handcuffs. Then she looked at the congregation of church women who were watching her with the same expression they usually reserved for sinners at the altar. The shame was a physical weight pressing down on her shoulders, forcing her to hunch over the coffee table. She reached out with a trembling hand and picked up the cheap ballpoint pen I had provided. It was a stark contrast to the Mont Blanc she usually used to sign checks she did not own. Mr. Henderson stepped forward, pulling a sleek smartphone from his pocket. He tapped the screen and held it up, the red recording light blinking like an unblinking eye. "State your name for the record, Vivica," he commanded, his voice devoid of sympathy. "And state that you are signing this confession of judgment of your own free will, acknowledging the theft of funds from the estate of Rose Jenkins and the Mount Zion Baptist Church." Vivica looked into the camera lens, her face gray and haggard. She took a ragged breath that sounded like a death rattle. "I am Vivica Jenkins," she whispered, tears leaking from her eyes. "I am signing this of my own free will. I acknowledge the debt." She bent over the paper and signed. Her signature was not the flamboyant flourish she usually used. It was small, cramped, and defeated. She pushed the paper away, as if it burned her, and collapsed back onto the sofa, covering her face with her hands. The sound of her weeping filled the room, a pathetic soundtrack to her total destruction. "Next, Keisha," Mr. Henderson said, panning the camera to my cousin. She was hugging herself, rocking back and forth. She looked at Chad for help, but he was staring at his own shoes, lost in his own nightmare. She looked at me, her eyes filled with hate. "Do I have to say it?" she asked, her voice petulant. "Every word," Mr. Henderson replied. "Or the officer takes you downtown right now." Keisha snatched the pen. "I am Keisha Vance," she spat the words out. She signed the document with a violent slash of the pen, nearly tearing the paper. "There, are you happy now? You ruined my life." "I did not ruin your life, Keisha," I said calmly. Collecting her paper, checking the signature. "You ruined it the minute you decided stealing from a dying woman was easier than getting a job." Finally, it was Chad's turn. He did not need prompting. He knew exactly what this document meant. He knew it was the only thing keeping him from a federal indictment and potentially a concrete grave. He picked up the pen, his hand shaking so badly he had to use his other hand to steady it. "I am Chad Vance," he said to the camera, his voice hollow, dead. "I admit to forging the signature on the home equity line of credit and misappropriating the funds. I agree to the repayment terms." He signed quickly, desperate to get it over with. He handed the paper to me, his eyes pleading for a mercy I did not have. Mr. Henderson stopped the recording and saved the video to the cloud. He looked at the three of them, huddled together in their misery, a tableau of greed gone wrong. "I have the video evidence and the signed confessions," he said, putting his phone away. "If you miss a payment by a single day, if you try to contact Nia, if you step foot on this property ever again after today, this goes to the district attorney, and there will be no plea bargain. Do we understand each other?" They nodded, silent, broken, defeated. I gathered the papers and placed them in my bag, zipping it shut with a sense of finality. The air in the room felt lighter, cleaner, as if the poison had been drawn out. But we were not done yet. Because just as I turned to tell them to start packing, a sound came from the driveway that made Chad's blood run cold. The sound of heavy tires on gravel and the slamming of SUV doors. The gravel in the driveway crunched under the weight of heavy tires as two matte black SUVs screeched to a halt right in front of the porch. The engines cut simultaneously, and for a split second, there was only the sound of car doors opening in unison. Then heavy boots hit the wooden steps, thudding with a menacing rhythm that made the crystal in the china cabinet vibrate. The front door, which had been left slightly ajar by the police officer, was kicked fully open, bouncing off the wall with a violence that made Vivica scream. 4 men walked into the foyer. They did not look like funeral guests. They wore leather jackets, tight jeans, and expressions that promised pain. The leader was a man with a neck tattoo of a scorpion and eyes that looked like they had seen everything and felt nothing. He scanned the room, ignoring the weeping women, the shocked church members, and even the police officer who had instinctively put his hand on his holster. "Where is he?" the leader asked, his voice a low rumble like distant thunder. He did not shout. He did not have to. Chad let out a squeak of pure terror. He scrambled backward, knocking over a floor lamp, and tried to wedge himself behind Keisha, using his own wife as a human shield. "Do not let them take me," he whimpered, pulling Keisha in front of him like a sandbag. "They are going to kill me. Tell them I have the money. Tell them the deal is done." Keisha struggled against him, her eyes wide with confusion and fear. "Get off me, Chad! Who are these people?" The leader stepped into the living room, his gaze locking onto Chad, cowering form. "We are the collection agency," he said with a humorless smile. "And your husband is past due, very past due. We were told there would be a title transfer today. We were told there would be equity. We were told we would get our 50,000 plus interest." He walked past me, ignoring me completely. His focus was singular, predatory. He stopped 3 feet from where Chad was shivering behind Keisha. "You told us you had the deed." "Chad?" the leader said, cracking his knuckles. "The boss does not like liars, and he really does not like waiting for his money. So here is how this is going to work. You are going to come with us right now, and we are going to take a little ride, and you are going to explain to the boss why you wasted his time." "No!" Chad shrieked, trying to burrow deeper behind Keisha, who was now crying in terror. "I cannot go with you. I signed a confession. I am under investigation. The police are here. Look, there is a cop." The leader looked at the police officer, then back at Chad. "We do not care about the police. We do not care about your confession. We care about our cash. You took it. You spent it. Now you pay." One of the other men stepped forward, reaching for Chad. He did not care that Chad was hiding behind a woman. He grabbed Chad by the collar of his suit and yanked him forward, throwing Keisha to the side like a rag doll. She hit the floor hard, screaming as she scrambled away from the violence. "Please," Chad begged, his feet scrabbling on the rug, leaving skid marks in the spilled tea. "I can get it. My wife has money. Her grandmother just died. She is rich. Take her. She will pay you." I watched from the other side of the room, my arms crossed over my chest, witnessing the absolute depth of his cowardice. He was willing to sell out his wife to save his own skin. It was pathetic. It was disgusting, and it was exactly what I expected. The thug held Chad by the lapels of his Italian suit, lifting him onto his toes like a naughty schoolboy. But Chad was not done fighting dirty. He clawed at the man, his eyes bulging with the panic of a rat that knows the trap has snapped shut. In a moment of pure survival instinct, he reached out and grabbed Keisha, who was trying to crawl away toward the kitchen. He yanked her back by the strap of her dress, the fabric tearing with a sound like a scream. He spun her around and shoved her violently into the chest of the man with the scorpion tattoo, using his own wife as a human shield against the debt he had created. "She has the money," Chad screamed, his voice high and shrill, hurting my ears. "Take her instead. She is the heir. Her grandmother just died and left her everything. She is loaded. She can pay you double what I owe. Just let me go." The room froze in a tableau of absolute moral bankruptcy. The church mothers covered their mouths, witnessing a man sacrifice his spouse. Without a second of hesitation, Keisha stumbled into the thug, her face inches from his leather jacket. She looked back at Chad, her eyes wide with a betrayal that went deeper than any affair. She realized in that split second that the man she had married for status, The man she had stolen from her grandmother to impress viewed her as nothing more than currency to be traded for his own skin. The thug looked down at Keisha, sneering at her tear-streaked face and the fake designer jewelry rattling on her wrists. He tightened his grip on her arm, making her wail in pain. "Is that right?" he growled, looking between Chad and Keisha. "You holding out on us, sweetheart. You got the old lady cash." Keisha panic shifted instantly. She did not try to defend her husband. She did not try to reason with the men. She did exactly what she had done her entire life. She looked for someone else to take the fall. She looked for a scapegoat, and her eyes landed on me. Standing calm and untouched across the room, "No," she shrieked. "No." Struggling against the thug grip. "I do not have it. He is lying. I am broke. Look at my car. It is leased. Look at this house. It is not mine." She pointed a shaking finger at me. Her face twisted into a mask of ugly desperation. "That is Nia. She is the one with the money. She got the inheritance. She got the millions. She is the one you want. Take her. She can pay you. She is the rich one." I watched them turning on each other, throwing each other to the wolves without a shred of dignity. It was the final confirmation of everything I had ever known about them. They were hollow people filled only with greed and fear. And now that the money was gone, they were eating each other alive to survive. Just one more minute. The thug released Keisha, shoving her to the floor with a grunt of dismissal. He looked from her to Chad, and then slowly turned his head to look at me. His eyes were cold, calculating, assessing the threat level. He took a step toward me, leaving the shivering, sobbing couple in a heap on the floor. "You are the bank," he said, stepping over a broken vase. "You got $50,000 for me, lady. Or do we have to start breaking things?" I did not flinch. I did not step back. I just smiled, that same cold smile I used when I found a hidden offshore account during an audit. "You are making a mistake," I said, my voice steady and calm. "You are listening to the wrong people, and you are walking toward the wrong woman." The man with the scorpion tattoo stopped inches from my face. He smelled of cheap tobacco and expensive violence. He towered over me, casting a shadow that would have made anyone else tremble. But I did not move. I did not blink. I looked him dead in the eye, and I saw the exact moment his confidence wavered. He was expecting fear. He was expecting tears. He was expecting a woman who would open her checkbook to make the bad man go away. Instead, he found a woman who looked at him like he was a rounding error on a tax return. "You are making a mistake." I repeated, my voice steady and low. "Because I am not the bank. I am the auditor. And I know exactly who you are. You are not just a collection agency, are you? You are the enforcement arm for Northside Holdings LLC, a shell company registered in Delaware that funnels illegal gambling proceeds through a chain of laundromats in Decatur." The thug eyes narrowed. His hand drifted toward his waistband. "You talk too much, lady," he growled. "Just pay the debt." I took a step forward, invading his personal space. It was a power move that confused him. Predators are not used to being approached by their prey. "I know about the 3 wire transfers made last Tuesday to the Cayman Islands," I said, reciting the numbers from memory. "I know about the structuring scheme you used to avoid IRS reporting requirements. Breaking deposits down to $9,000 to stay under the radar. Very amateur. And I know about the federal investigation currently building a RICO case against your entire organization. It is case number 49B72. I consulted on the forensic audit." The thug froze. The menace drained out of his posture, replaced by a sudden sharp alertness. He looked at his crew, then back at me. "Who are you?" he asked, his voice losing its gravelly edge. "Are you a cop?" "I am worse," I said with a cold smile. "I am the person who finds the money, and I know where it all goes. I know it does not go to you. You are just the muscle. The money goes to the man at the top, the man who hates having his name spoken aloud." I leaned in close, standing on my toes so my lips were right next to his ear. I whispered a name that was not in any public record, a name that only appeared on encrypted ledgers and FBI most wanted lists. Silas Thorne. The effect was instantaneous. The thug face went pale. He stepped back as if I had pulled a gun on him. His eyes were wide with genuine terror. "How do you know that name?" he hissed, looking around the room as if the walls were listening. "Nobody says that name. I know it because I traced his assets through 6 different countries," I said, stepping back to my full height. "I know where he docks his boat in Miami. I know about the shell accounts in Zurich. And most importantly, I know that he does not like attention. He does not like his low-level enforcers making scenes in historic neighborhoods and drawing police attention to his operations. So ask yourself a question. Is $50,000 worth bringing the heat of the entire federal government down on Silas Thorne? Because if you touch me, if you touch anyone in this house, I will make a phone call. And by tomorrow morning, every asset he has will be frozen." The thug looked at me, then at Chad shivering on the floor, then at the police officer by the door who was now speaking into his radio. He did the math. He realized that whatever Chad owed it was not worth the risk I represented. He looked at his men and jerked his head toward the door. "We are leaving," he announced, his voice tight. But Chad shrieked from the floor, realizing his protection was walking away. "You cannot leave me. You have to take the money. Make her pay." The thug looked at Chad with pure disgust. "You are on your own," he said. "We were never here." He turned back to me one last time, a look of grudging respect in his eyes. "You are dangerous, lady." I smoothed the lapel of my blazer. "You have no idea," I replied. "Now get out of my house before I change my mind and call the special agent in charge." The thugs did not wait. They turned and marched out the front door, their boots thudding on the hardwood, retreating from the only person in the room who actually held the power. "I am offering you a one-time courtesy," I said, stepping back to give the man with the scorpion tattoo a clear path to the door. "You walk away from this house right now. You forget this address. You forget my face. And in exchange, I forget that I saw you here. I forget to forward the dossier on your boss, money laundering operation, to my contact at the Times. The email is already written. It is scheduled to send automatically if I do not enter a code by midnight. So ask yourself, is Chad Vance worth your entire organization going down in flames?" The thug stared at me, his chest heaving slightly. He looked at the phone in my hand, then at the laptop still glowing on the coffee table. He knew when he was beaten. He knew that violence could not stop a digital bullet that had already been fired. He nodded slowly, a gesture of surrender that cost him his pride but saved his skin. "You make a compelling argument, lady," he grunted. "We have no beef with you. Consider the estate clear." He signaled to his men with a sharp jerk of his chin. "Let us go, boys, we are done here." The men lowered their weapons and turned toward the door, their leather jackets creaking in the silence. "Wait!" Chad screamed, scrambling up from the floor, his face a mask of sheer panic. "You cannot just leave me. You have to take the money. Make her give it to you. She has millions." The leader stopped and turned back to Chad, a cruel smile spreading across his face. The lady made her position very clear. "Chad, her money is off limits. But your debt, that is still very much active. And since you do not have the cash and you do not have the house, we are going to have to work out an alternative payment plan." He reached out and grabbed Chad by the back of his neck, his fingers digging into the flesh like iron claws. "You are coming with us. We need to have a long conversation about compound interest and the consequences of wasting our time." "No!" Chad wailed, flailing his arms, trying to grab onto the doorframe, onto the furniture, onto anything that would anchor him to the safety of the house he had tried to steal. "Vivica, help me. Keisha, do not let them take me. I am your husband." Keisha stood frozen by the sofa, her hands covering her mouth. She did not move to help him. She did not scream for the police. She watched with wide, terrified eyes as the man she had married for status was dragged kicking and screaming out of her life. She was not thinking about saving him. She was thinking about saving herself. I watched them drag him out the front door, his heels leaving scuff marks on the hardwood floor. I felt nothing. Not pity, not satisfaction, just the cold, clinical detachment of an auditor closing a file. Chad had made his choices. He had borrowed money from sharks, and now he was surprised they had teeth. I did not invite them in, I said to the empty room as the heavy door slammed shut, cutting off Chad's screams. But I am certainly not going to stop them from taking out the trash. The debt is personal, Chad, and now so is the collection. The front door had barely clicked shut behind the collection agency when the humid air outside was split by the wail of sirens. It sounded like the entire Atlanta police force had descended on Martin Luther King, drive blue and red lights flashing through the sheer drapes, turning the living room into a strobe-lit nightmare. Mr. Henderson checked his vintage pocket watch with a satisfied click of his tongue. "Right on time," he murmured. "I took the liberty of contacting the authorities the moment Mr. Vance admitted to federal bank fraud on camera. The timing was impeccable, calculated to ensure maximum chaos. Outside the noise was deafening. I walked to the window and pulled back the curtain just in time to see the black SUVs peeling out of the driveway, tires spinning on the gravel as the thugs realized they had walked into a trap. They dumped Chad on the lawn like a sack of unwanted garbage and sped off, leaving him sprawling in the grass as 3 police cruisers blocked the exit. The thugs might get away for now, but Chad was not so lucky. Chad scrambled to his feet, seeing the police officers drawing their weapons. Instead of running away, he ran toward them, arms waving frantically above his head like a man signaling a rescue plane. "Arrest me!" he screamed, his voice cracking with hysterical relief. "Thank God, arrest me! Take me to jail! Please, just take me away from them!" It was the most pathetic display of self-preservation I had ever witnessed, a man begging for handcuffs because he knew the alternative was a shallow grave in the woods. The officers obliged him roughly, spinning him around and slamming him against the hood of a cruiser. I watched as they read him his rights, the metallic click of the handcuffs echoing in the night. It was a strange irony. Chad had spent his entire life trying to avoid consequences, trying to cheat the system. And now he was embracing the penal system as his only sanctuary. Prison was not a punishment anymore. It was a safe house. Inside the house, Vivica and Keisha were huddled, together, watching the scene unfold with horror. They thought the show was over. They thought they were just spectators to Chad's downfall. But the front door opened again and a detective walked in, flanked by 2 uniformed officers. He did not look at me. He looked straight at Vivica and Keisha. Vivica Jenkins and Keisha Vance. He said, his voice flat and professional. "We have probable cause to detain you both for questioning regarding multiple counts of elder abuse, financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult, and grand larceny. We suggest you come with us quietly." Vivica let out a gasp that sounded like a balloon deflating. "Me," she stammered, clutching her chest. "I am a pillar of this community. I am a church mother. You cannot arrest me. I am the victim here. My son-in-law deceived me." The detective was unmoved. "Save it for the station, Ma. We have the video evidence provided by the estate executor. We have the bank records, and we have your signed confessions. Turns out stealing from a dying woman is frowned upon in this state. Put your hands behind your back!" Keisha started wailing as the officer cuffed her wrists, the cold steel biting into her skin just above her gold bracelets. She looked at me, her eyes wide with shock, expecting me to intervene, expecting me to save them, because that is what family does. But I just stood there, my face impassive, watching justice take its course. They were being led out of the house. They thought they owned, escorted by the law. They thought they could ignore. I walked out onto the porch to watch the finale. Chad was already in the back of a squad car, weeping against the window. Vivica was trying to maintain her dignity while being guided into another vehicle, her large hat knocked askew in the struggle. Keisha was screaming for her mother, screaming for Chad, screaming for anyone to help her. But no one was coming. The neighborhood had come out to watch neighbors lining the sidewalks, their phones out recording the downfall of the high and mighty Jenkins women. It was the end of an era and the beginning of their nightmare. The police cruisers were still idling in the driveway, lights flashing against the twilight sky. But I was not finished cleaning house. I turned to the two massive private security guards Mr. Henderson had brought with him. They were standing on the porch watching the officers secure Vivica and Keisha in the back of the squad cars. I gestured toward the open front door with a sharp wave of my hand. "Gentlemen," I said, my voice carrying over the low hum of the engines. "I want every single item belonging to Vivica Jenkins and Keisha Vance removed from my property immediately. Do not pack it, do not organize it, just get it out of my house." The guards nodded and marched inside, moving with military efficiency. I stood on the top step of the porch, crossing my arms and watching the show. The neighbors had gathered in a semicircle on the sidewalk drawn by the sirens and staying for the drama. I saw phones held high, screens glowing as they glowing. Livestreamed the downfall of the neighborhood's self-proclaimed matriarchs. Mrs. Johnson from across the street was narrating into her phone, her voice excited. "Look at this. Why all, the Jenkins house is being raided. That is Vivica in the police car. Lord have mercy." A moment later, the first wave of belongings came flying out the front door. One of the guards tossed a pile of Vivica elaborate church hats onto the lawn. They fluttered down like colorful dying birds, landing in the dirt and the oil spots left by Chad. SUV. Next came armfuls of Keisha clothes. Cheap, fast fashion fabrics in neon colors, scattering across the grass, mixing with the spilled contents of her makeup bag. It was a trash heap of vanity. Vivica started screaming from the back of the police cruiser, banging her handcuffed fists against the reinforced window. "My hats!" she wailed, muffled by the glass. "That is custom millinery. You cannot do this. That is my property." The officer in the front seat just ignored her, busy filling out paperwork. Then came the suitcases. The guards had gone into the bedrooms and swept everything into piles, shoving them into open luggage before dragging them onto the porch and heaving them down the stairs, zippers bursting open under the strain. Designer knockoff shoes with broken heels and half-empty bottles of perfume spilled onto the walkway, creating an obstacle course of debris. It looked like an eviction, it looked like a raid, it looked like justice. The crowd on the sidewalk grew larger. I heard the comments drifting over the lawn. "I knew they were crooked," one man said, shaking his head. "Always acting better than everyone else while driving a car bought with stolen church money." Another woman pointed at the pile of clothes. "Look at all that junk!" And she had the nerve to criticize my Sunday best last week. Karma is real, honey. I walked down the steps, picking my way through the scattered wreckage of their lives. I approached the pile of Vivica belongings and used the toe of my shoe to flip over a framed photo. It was a picture of Vivica receiving an award for community service. The glass cracked under my heel, spiderwebbing across her smiling face. I looked up at the neighbors, meeting their gazes. I did not hide. I did not look away. I let them see exactly who was in charge. "Now, this is what happens when you steal from family," I said loud enough for the phones to pick up. "This is what happens when you build a life on lies. The foundation crumbles, and you end up on the curb where you belong." Keisha's face was pressed against the glass of the other police car, her eyes wide with horror as she watched her collection of sneakers being rained on by the sudden evening drizzle. She was watching her status, her image and her future, turn into soggy garbage on the front lawn. They had tried to throw me out with nothing. 14 years later I was returning the favor, but I was making sure the whole world watched them fall. I walked down the driveway toward the police cruiser where Vivica sat, trapped behind the wire mesh like a rabid dog finally caught by animal control. The officer standing by the driver door saw me approaching and hesitated, his hand resting on the roof of the car. He looked at me, then at the woman in the back seat, and nodded once, rolling the back window down halfway. It was a small mercy, not for her but for me. a chance to say the words that had been stuck in my throat for 14 years. Vivica looked up as I stopped beside the car. She looked small without her hat stripped of her pretension and her stolen jewelry. Her makeup was streaked. Her hair was coming loose from its pins and her expensive dress was rumpled and stained. But her eyes were dry, burned out by a hate so pure it felt like heat radiating from the pavement. She did not look sorry. She did not look afraid. She looked venomous. "You think you won?" she hissed, her voice raspy and low. "You think because you have the paper and the money and the clever lawyer that you are the winner. But look at you, Nia, look around you." She gestured with her cuffed hands, as much as the space allowed toward the empty lawn and the neighbors staring from the street. "You are standing there all alone. You have no mother. You have no father. And now, thanks to you, you have no family at all." She leaned closer to the glass, her breath fogging it up, a ghostly halo around her mouth. "You are going to rot in that big empty house, Nia. You are going to walk those halls at night and hear the silence screaming at you. You are going to wish you had let us take it, just so you would have someone to talk to. You are going to die alone, just like your grandmother did, unwanted and unloved. I curse you, Nia Jenkins. May your money turn to ash in your mouth. May your loneliness choke you until you cannot breathe." I looked at her, really looked at her for the last time. I did not feel fear. I did not feel the sting of her curse. I just felt a profound pity for a woman so broken. She thought abuse was love and exploitation was family. I let her words hang in the humid air for a moment, letting the neighbors hear her bitterness, letting the police officer see her true face. "You are wrong about two things, Auntie," I said, leaning down so our eyes were level, my voice calm and steady. "First, Big Mama did not die alone. She died with me holding her hand. Even if I had to sneak past your sleeping nurses to do it. She died knowing I was there. She died knowing the truth." I straightened up, smoothing the lapel of my blazer, brushing off an imaginary speck of dust. "And second, regarding your concern for my social life, do not worry about me. I am very comfortable with my own company, and let us be realistic about our living arrangements moving forward." I gestured toward the mansion behind me, glowing in the twilight, beautiful and majestic and finally safe. And then I pointed toward the cage she was sitting in. "I would rather be lonely in a $5 million historic mansion with central air, a wine cellar and a heated pool than be popular in a 6x8 prison cell sharing a toilet with a stranger I hear. The overcrowding in the state penitentiary is terrible this time of year, Auntie, and the food is definitely not up to your standards. So you enjoy the noise and the company in there? I will enjoy the peace and quiet out here." Vivica mouth opened to scream, another curse to spit more poison. But I was done. I signaled the officer with a sharp nod. He rolled up the window, cutting off her sound, sealing her inside. Her new reality. The engine revved and the cruiser pulled away, tires crunching on the gravel one last time. It was followed by the second car carrying Keisha, who was still weeping against the glass. The convoy turned onto Martin Luther King Drive, their taillights fading into the distance, taking the toxicity that had poisoned this land for too long with them. I turned around and walked back up the driveway. The neighbors were starting to disperse the show over the sun, dipping below the horizon. I stopped at the threshold of the estate and reached into my pocket, pulling out the heavy iron key to the main gate. I pressed the button on the remote control mounted on the brick pillar. The heavy wrought iron gates began to swing shut. They groaned on their hinges, a sound like ancient history being rewritten. They moved slowly, inexorably, closing the gap between the street and my sanctuary. Clang. The sound of the latch engaging was heavy and final, metal locking against metal, sealing me inside and sealing them out forever. I stood there for a long moment in the gathering dusk, listening to the wind rustle through the magnolia trees. It was the first time in 14 years that the air tasted sweet. It was the taste of justice. It was the taste of freedom. And as the first star appeared in the evening sky, I knew I would never be lonely in this house, because it was finally filled with the truth. The silence in the house after the police cars faded away was heavy, but it was not oppressive anymore. It was the kind of silence that comes after a fever breaks. Mr. Henderson poured 2 glasses of amber liquid from a crystal decanter on the sideboard and handed one to me. His hand was steady, his eyes warm behind his wire-rimmed glasses. He did not look like a lawyer in that moment. He looked like the old family friend he had been for 40 years. He reached into the inside pocket of his suit jacket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. It was not legal stationery. It was a page torn from a yellow legal pad, the kind Big Mama used to write her grocery lists on. The handwriting was shaky, filled with the tremors of old age and illness, but it was unmistakably hers. He handed it to me without a word. I unfolded the paper, my fingers tracing the indentations where her pen had pressed hard against the page. It was dated 2 years ago, right around the time I had received the promotion to senior forensic accountant in Chicago. My dearest Nia. The letter began, I am writing this because I am a coward. I saw Vivica take the ring that day 14 years ago. I was standing in the hallway and I saw her slip it into her pocket just before she started screaming that you stole it. I wanted to run in there. I wanted to shake her and tell the truth. But I froze. Vivica looked at me with eyes that did not belong to my daughter. They were the eyes of a stranger filled with a darkness I did not understand. She whispered to me later that if I defended you, she would make sure you never made it out of Atlanta. She threatened to call the police and plant drugs in your bag. She said she would destroy you if I did not let you go. I had to stop reading for a moment to breathe. The air in the room suddenly felt thin. Big Mama had not believed I was a thief. She had exiled me to save me. She had broken her own heart to ensure I got away from the toxicity that was consuming this house. I read on, the tears blurring the ink slightly. I could not speak up then, but I could not let you starve. The anonymous scholarship you received, the Horizon Grant for Inner City Youth. It was not a charity. Nia, it was me. I sold the timber rights on the Cobb County land quietly, so Vivica would not know, and I funneled the money through Mr. Henderson. I paid for your tuition. I paid for your books. I watched you graduate from afar, and I have never been prouder. You became strong because you had to. But please forgive an old woman for not being strong enough to fight for you. Then I am fighting for you now from the grave. This house is yours. The future is yours. Do not let them take it. I looked up at Mr. Henderson, tears streaming down my face. Uncheck. She paid for college, I whispered. I thought I got that on merit. You did get it on merit, Mr. Henderson said softly. She just made sure the check cleared. She wanted to make sure you had a ladder to climb out of the hole they dug for you. She protected you, the only way she knew how, by getting you as far away from Vivica as possible. I held the letter to my chest, feeling the phantom warmth of Big Mama love. It was not the reunion I had wanted, but it was the closure I needed. I was never abandoned. I was deployed. I was sent away to build armor to sharpen my skills, so that when I finally came back, I would be the weapon she needed to clean house. And now the job was done. 3 months later, the fluorescent lights of the Lenox Square Mall food court buzzed with a familiar drone. The smell of processed sugar and pretzel dough hung in the air. I sat at a high-top table near the railing, my sunglasses on, watching the ecosystem of commerce below. But I was not looking at the shoppers. I was looking at the cleaning crew. A woman in a shapeless gray jumpsuit was pushing a mop bucket toward a spilled soda near the entrance of the luxury wing. Her hair was pulled back in a frizzy ponytail, the expensive weave long gone. Her nails, once long, talons of acrylic art, were short and chipped. She looked 10 years older than she had at the funeral. Her shoulders were slumped in defeat as she wrung out the mop, her hands red and chapped from harsh chemicals. It was Keisha, the golden child, The princess who refused to work. The woman who had stolen from a dying grandmother to buy a purse she could no longer afford. Life had come at her fast. Chad had pleaded guilty to federal bank fraud and was currently serving the first year of a 12-year sentence in a medium security facility without air conditioning. The Apex group had dissolved into the wind, leaving him to hold the bag for the entire scheme. Without her husband income, and with her mother assets seized to pay restitution, Keisha had hit rock bottom with a velocity that shattered her. I watched as a group of girls she used to party with walked out of Neiman Marcus carrying shopping bags. They spotted her and stopped whispering behind their hands. Keisha kept her head down, scrubbing furiously at a sticky spot on the tile, trying to become invisible, trying to scrub away her own existence. She was learning the lesson Big Mama had tried to teach her with the broken Cadillac. She was learning that status is rented, but dignity is earned, and right now, she was in arrears on both. She finished mopping and leaned against the wall, wiping sweat from her forehead with the back of her hand. She looked up and for a second her eyes met mine across the food court. There was no anger in them anymore. There was no entitlement. There was just exhaustion and the hollow look of someone who realizes they are exactly where they belong. I did not smile. I did not wave. I just watched. She was living in a weekly rate motel off the highway, taking the bus to work because the Range Rover had been repossessed the day after the funeral. She was working minimum wage to pay off a debt that would take her decades to clear. I stood up, picking up my bag and turning away. I did not need to say anything. The mop bucket said it all. Justice was not just a gavel banging in a courtroom. It was the slow, grinding reality of consequences. It was watching the person who thought she was too good to work scrubbing the floor for the people she used to look down on. Big Mama had cleaned house indeed, and she had left the trash exactly where it belonged. The fall of Vivica Jenkins was not a loud crash, but a slow, humiliating slide into irrelevance. To avoid the felony charges and the prison sentence that would have killed her, she had to liquidate everything. Her house, the one she had preened over for decades, was sold at auction to pay the first installment of the restitution debt she owed the estate. I watched from a distance as the movers hauled out her furniture, the velvet sofas she would not let anyone sit on, and the dining table where she had plotted my exile. It was all gone, sold for pennies on the dollar to pay for her sins. She did not move into a condo or a retirement community. She ended up in a one-bedroom apartment in a subsidized housing complex on the edge of town, the kind of place where the elevator was always broken and the walls were paper-thin. The humiliation was absolute. The church community she had ruled with an iron fist turned their backs on her completely. When she tried to attend service the Sunday after the confrontation, the ushers silently blocked the door. They did not make a scene, they just formed a wall of black suits and white gloves, denying her entry to the sanctuary she had defiled. I saw her once a few weeks later at the grocery store. She was counting coupons in the checkout line, arguing with the cashier over 50 cents. She looked shrunken, her posture collapsed under the weight of her new reality. She was wearing a plain cotton dress and sensible shoes, the uniform of the invisible poor she used to mock. When she saw me walking down the aisle, she did not scream or curse. She just turned her cart around and walked away, abandoning her groceries on the belt. She finally understood that she had not just lost the money, she had lost the privilege of being seen. She was living the life she had tried to force on me, and the irony was a bitter meal she had to eat every single day. While Vivica was learning the hard way about consequences, I was busy breathing new life into 450 Martin Luther King Drive. Everyone expected me to sell. The neighbors, the developers, even Mr. Henderson thought I would take the cash and run back to Chicago. But I had a different plan. Big Mama did not save this house just so I could flip it. She saved it so I could use it. I spent the next month renovating the ground floor. I did not tear down the walls or strip the history. I restored the hardwood, I polished the banisters, and I turned the massive living room where Chad had been arrested into a reception area. I hired a contractor to fix the guest house the one Chad had nearly lost and turned it into a temporary shelter for seniors in crisis. 6 weeks after the funeral, I placed a modest brass plaque next to the front door. It read the Rose Jenkins Legal Defense Center. I had used my connections in the city to partner with a team of pro bono lawyers and financial advisors. Our mission was simple. We provided forensic accounting and legal aid to the elderly victims of financial fraud. We helped grandmothers who had been scammed by contractors and grandfathers who had been robbed by greedy relatives. The community response was overwhelming. The house that had once been a fortress of secrets became a beacon of hope. I sat in Big Mama's old study, which was now my office, listening to stories that broke my heart, and then using my skills to fix them. I traced stolen pensions, I recovered deed thefts, and I put scammers in jail. Every time I helped a client get their dignity back, I felt like I was paying Big Mama back for the tuition she had sent me. I was not just the lady in the big house anymore. I was a protector. And for the first time in my life, when I walked down the street, people did not whisper about the girl who stole the ring. They waved at the woman who saved the neighborhood. The sun was setting over Atlanta, painting the sky in bruised purples and burning oranges. I stood on the second-floor balcony, holding a glass of vintage red wine, leaning against the railing that had just been repainted. Below me, the garden was transformed. The weeds were gone, the overgrown hedges were trimmed, and the magnolias were in full bloom. It was quiet, peaceful, the kind of silence that you have to earn. I took a sip of wine, letting the rich flavor settle on my tongue. I looked out over the city, the lights flickering on, one by one. I thought about the journey that had brought me here. The exile, the lonely nights in Chicago, the years of grinding work to become the best in my field. It had all led to this moment. I had faced my demons, and I had won. I had cleaned out the rot in my family tree and planted something new in its place. My phone buzzed on the small table beside me, shattering the stillness. I picked it up expecting a call from Mr. Henderson or maybe a client update. The caller ID was a Washington, D.C. area code. I swiped to answer. "Ms. Jenkins," a deep voice said. "This is Special Agent Miller with the FBI Financial Crimes Division. We have been following your work on the Apex Group case and your recent success with the local fraud ring. We have a situation involving a multinational nursing home conglomerate that is laundering money through shell companies. It is big, messy, and dangerous. We need an outside consultant with your specific skill set. Are you interested?" I looked out at the horizon, a slow smile spreading across my face. I looked down at my hand, where Big Mama's ring now sat on my right finger, sparkling in the twilight. I had saved my home. I had served my justice. But I was not done fighting. Not by a long shot. I took another sip of wine and leaned back against the warm brick of the house. "Agent Miller," I said, my voice steady and ready for war. "Tell me where to start." This story serves as a powerful reminder that true family is defined by loyalty and respect, not just blood. Nia's journey from a rejected outcast to the protector of her grandmother's legacy proves that your worth is never determined by those who fail to see it. Instead of reacting with blind anger, she used intelligence and patience to dismantle their greed, showing that success is the ultimate form of justice. It teaches us that while the truth may be delayed, it can never be buried. And sometimes you must be willing to stand alone to stand up for what is right. If you have ever had to set boundaries with toxic family members to protect your peace, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories of resilience and justice.